Galw'r aelodau I drefn yr eitem gyntaf yn gyda ni'r prynawn yma yw cwestiynau Prif Weinidog a'r cwestiwn cyntaf Janet Finch-Saunders.
Diolch, Llawyn. Will the First Minister make a statement on tackling rural crime?
Yes, we work closely with Welsh Police Forces, Natural Resources Wales and local authorities to prevent and tackle rural crime and to help make people feel safer, both at home and in public places.
Thank you, First Minister. Rural crime, of course, costs the rural economy over £2 million each year. In North Wales, we have a very hard-working rural crime team working with other agencies, but they estimate that 75% of their workload is related to livestock crime. In 3 years, 2,000 sheep have been killed in 400 separate dog attacks. They tackle vehicle theft, rural business theft, as well as badger baiting and animal abuse. Will you endorse with me here today and support the excellent work carried out by the North Wales Rural Crime Team and pledge your support and any additional resources that might be available for their sterling work going forward?
Well, bear in mind, of course, that policing is not devolved and therefore funding largely comes from the Home Office. But I can say that, of course, we support the team. The Cabinet Secretary met with the team on the 15th of June and received an update on the scale of the issue, the response that they had put in place, and also the work ongoing to change the law at the UK level.
Rhiannon Passmore.
First Minister, in Islam we face on the historic Tumbalum Tump the scourge of fly tipping, and it costs Wales nearly £2 million each year in clean-up costs, which ultimately has to be paid by the taxpayer. This rural crime is harmful to human health and spoils the enjoyment of our stunning countryside. Since 2007, Welsh Government has funded Fly Tipping Action Wales, an initiative coordinated by National Resources Wales and involving over 50 partners working together to tackle fly tipping through education. What does the Welsh Government believe are the actions needed to achieve our vision of combating this menace?
Firstly, a change of attitude and culture so that some people, those who do fly tip, realise how antisocial it is. Secondly, of course, enforcement and working with Natural Resources Wales and local authorities and the public, indeed, to make sure that happens. And thirdly, of course, through enforcement of penalties. For example, we know that we've looked at introducing fixed penalty notices for small-scale fly tipping incidents. That provides local authorities with a more efficient and proportionate response to low-level, high-volume offences. But, of course, for those who are more serious and more serial offenders, then, of course, they can be prosecuted within the law. But, of course, this does depend on intelligence coming from the public in order to provide the evidence in the first place.
Simon Thomas.
Diolch, Llywydd. Yn ystod y wythnos yma, mae Heddlu David Powys a'r Prifysgol Aberystwyth yn cynnal astudiaeth mewn I troseddu gwledig I trio casglu tystiolaeth gan bod ni'n tybio a dweud y gwir bod troseddu gwledig yn costi mwy na fai a ffigurau sydd wedi cael ei defnyddio hyd yma. Fyddwch chi'n ymuno gyda fi yn annog ffermwyr I cyfrannu at y astudiaeth yna, a hefyd llongyfach Heddlu David Powys am defnyddio DNA defaid am y tro cyntaf erioed I sicrhau bod rhywun yn mynd I cael ei troseddu ac yn cael ei canfod yn euog am ladwata defaid, ac mae hwn yn datblygiad cyffroes, dwi'n meddwl, am maes troseddu gwledig.
Braf, wrth gwrs, mae'n hollbwysig bod ni gallu sicrhau mwy o dystiolaeth mwyn sicrhau bod yn gallu cael ei erlyn. Ond, wrth gwrs, mae'r heddlu a phob awdurdod yn dibynnu ar y gwybodaeth maen nhw'n cael o ffermwyr a rhai eraill sydd yn byw yng nghefn gwlad mwyn sicrhau bod nhw'n gallu cynyddu'r dystiolaeth hynny.
Cwestiwn 2, Llyr Griffith.
Diolch, Llywydd. Awn wneud y Prif Weinidog ddatganiad am yr is-adeiledd chwaraeon yng Ngogledd Cymru.
Na, mae yna nifer o gyfleusterau chwaraeon o radd flaenaf yn y Gogledd ar gyfer chwaraeon elit yn ogystal â chwaraeon cymunedol. A mae chwaraeon Cymru ein hasiant cyflenwi allweddol yn gweithio gyda phartneriaid I sicrhau bod darpariaeth briodol ym mhob ran o Gymru.
Wel, diolch I chi am eich ateb. Oedd hi'n ddiddorol nodi bod eich ysgrifennydd economi chi wedi bod yn awyddus iawn I weld datblygu canolfan convensiwn digwyddiadau pellach yng Nghaerdydd yn ddiweddar, wrth gwrs bod gyda ni Stadiwm y Millennium, Stadiwm Dinas Gaerdydd, Motorpoint Arena, mae gyda ni canolfan y Millennium, mae gyda ni ganolfan gonfensiwn yn Casnewydd dros lawr y ffordd, mae Stadiwm Liberty yn Abertawe, mae yna ganolfan gonfensiwn debyg ar y ffordd yn Abertawe, mae'n debyg, a phob lwc iddyn nhw. Dwi ddim yn danod hynny am eiliad, ond mae yna gwestiwn yn cael ei gofyn ynglyn â beth am fuddsoddi gan y Llywodraeth mewn cynlluniau yng Ngogledd Cymru ac yng Ngogledd Wyrain Cymru'n benodol. Mae'r Cae Ras, wrth gwrs, yn awyddus i'w datblygu hun fel canolfan chwaraeon ryngwladol, Mae'n awyddus hefyd i gynnal digwyddiadau. Oli Mers yna dros y penwythnos, miloedd lawer yna, ond y teimlad yw nad yw'r buddsoddiad yn dod. Felly'r cwestiwn, Prif Weinidog, i bob pwrpas yw, pryd y gwelwn ni y llywodraeth chi, yr un mor proactif, yr un mor rhagweithiol ag awyddus i annog y math yna o ddatblygiad yn rhywle fel y Cae Ras?
Wel, mi'n sôn am rai pethau fel yna sydd ddim yn cael i cefnogi gan y llywodraeth, sef yr arena yng Nghaerdydd, yr arena yn Abertawe. Ond, mi'n codi'r pwynt yn un ar Cae Ras. Ni moyn sicrhau bod y Cae Ras yn datblygu yn y pen draw. Mi'n holl bwysig wrth gwrs bod cynlluniau yn dod o'r Cae Ras i hunan mwyn bod ni'n gallu gweld am pa ffordd allwn ni gefnogi hwnna. Allwn ni ddim wrth gwrs i sefydlu cynlluniau'n hunain heb weithio gyda hwnna sydd yn y dre ar ardal eang. Wy'n gwybod bod yr ymddiriedolaeth cefnogwyr o clwb Pêl-drod Wrexham wedi rhoi adroddiad i swyddogion y Llywodraeth Cymru mwyn symud y broses hyn ymlaen, a ni'n awyddus i weithio gyda nhw.
Darren Miller.
One of the premier sports facilities in North Wales, of course, is Park Areas in my own constituency, the home of Rugby Gogledd Cymru, and I've been very pleased actually to see the Welsh Government's investment in that site over the years. But would you agree with me that if we're to have great sports facilities, we've also got to make sure that we've got the transport infrastructure to get people in and out of those facilities? One of the problems we have, of course, in North Wales is that A55 corridor and the congestion that occurs on it from time to time. And I wonder what action you're going to take to make sure that those sporting venues have adequate transport infrastructure around them.
Well, how topical the question is from the member, because I see that money has been made available for specific projects to the Northern Ireland Executive, and Wales is not being treated in the same way. We'd be more than delighted to take forward more measures on the A55 to reduce congestion, if only we were in a position where we had DUP members who could be bought by the Conservative government.
Cwestiynau nawr gan arweinwyr y pleidiau. Arweinydd yr wrthblaid Andrew R.T. Davies.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, this morning the Cabinet took the decision to not proceed with the funding package for the Circuit of Wales, and I appreciate the Minister will be making a statement later on this afternoon. Yesterday, the most senior civil servant in the department gave evidence to the Public Accounts Committee, where he talked of this project having a very high impact project in the status that it was held with in the department, and he also said it did deliver value for money, and these are his words I'm quoting to you, and it was a project that was ready, subject to finance, to be delivered. Now, the Cabinet Secretary, with his statement this morning, says that actually the claims around the project were significantly overstated, and he says, historically, there is little evidence on an international scale of any track on its own acting as a catalyst for further local employment. Those two statements from the senior civil servant and from the Cabinet Secretary are completely opposed to each other in the views that they're trying to create. Who's right and who's wrong when it comes to this project?
No, they're not, because phase 2 of the project is a technology park. That is something that we will proceed with as a government. That is the project that would have delivered the vast majority of the jobs. Unfortunately, the conditions that we laid down as far as the circuit itself was concerned could not be fulfilled by the company concerned. We wanted to make sure they had sufficient time to look to fulfil those conditions, but unfortunately that proved not to be the case.
I'm afraid that's not what the statement that came forward from the Cabinet Secretary this morning indicated. As I said in his written statement, he says that there is little evidence of a project like this delivering on the numbers that have been talked about. In fact, it actually talks of only 100 whole-time equivalent jobs being delivered on the circuit. I take that, and there is a park alongside it. But actually, the Permanent Secretary in that department said yesterday that it was a project ready to be delivered. He had confidence, and again, reiterating his words, it was a very high impact project. So obviously he had confidence in the project. Your government, at the 11th hour, withdrew its support for this project. You've offered a fig leaf by saying that you're going to reinvigorate the enterprise zone in Ebbw Vale, which has to date delivered very little investment to the area. I go back to the point, how can there be two wide-ranging statements, one from the Cabinet Secretary, one from the most senior civil servant, that are so opposed in the views of this project? I think the public deserve a greater understanding of why it has taken 5 years to get to this point.
I think he answered his own question by saying subject to finance, and that is the issue here. We wanted to offer the circuit every opportunity to meet the conditions that we had stipulated. They weren't able to meet those conditions, and so, as a result of that, the financial situation was not right for us to be able to support this scheme for the circuit. What we can, however, do is to deliver the vast majority of the jobs by delivering the technology park. We've spoken to potential investors. We've spoken to those in the industry. They are interested. They want to work with us on the technology park. So, yes, there are jobs to the tune of 4 figures that can be delivered as that technology park is taken forward. It's not dependent on there actually being physically a racetrack there.
Well, you will not be delivering the vast majority of the jobs as proposed in the original concept, because there were 6,000 jobs proposed around this project. And the actual park that you are talking about delivering is a potential of 1,500 jobs with a 10-year delivery programme for that park. So there is a dislocate. But the point I am driving at here, First Minister, is you have the permanent secretary in that department at complete loggerheads with the Cabinet Secretary in his interpretation. The evidence is there from the Public Accounts Committee of this project, and again, I repeat, a very high impact project. So that is finance, that is jobs, that is regeneration. Otherwise, why would he have used such language? Do you have confidence in James Price's ability to continue within his role, or are you back in the Cabinet Secretary?
It is frankly cowardice for any member in this chamber to name a civil servant in that way when they cannot respond. It is cowardice. I ask the Leader of the Welsh Conservatives to withdraw it.
I would like to reply to that, because to accuse someone of cowardice...
I
that is out of order to call someone a coward.
Probably inappropriate for you to be naming a civil servant in this place when that civil servant is not able to be here to answer for himself. So I'm going to move on now and call the leader of UKIP, Neil Hamilton.
We're not going to move on very far, I'm afraid, because I'm going to continue the line of questioning by the leader of the Welsh Conservatives. Isn't it now absolutely clear why this decision has been delayed until after the general election? And what the Welsh Government has done today is actually to kill the hopes of the people of Blaenau Gwent and a much wider area. There is nothing that the Government was able to discuss this morning that couldn't have been discussed weeks ago. There's nothing new at all in this decision. The limit of the Welsh Government's obligations would be a maximum of £8 million a year for 33 years, once all the buildings on the site were constructed. It's not so the whole thing would be telescoped up front and the money would have to be found tomorrow or within the next 3 years. And therefore, what this shows is a pathetic lack of vision on the part of the Welsh Government to kill this massive private enterprise scheme, which offered not just hope to one town in Wales, but actually to the whole of South East Wales.
It's difficult to be lectured by somebody who's part of a Conservative administration who closed down the last mine, for example, Marine 6 Bells in Blaenau Gwent, and was more than happy to do so. I mean, really, I can't take what he says in that regard seriously. The reason why the decision couldn't be taken at the time he mentions is because the due diligence process hadn't finished. Or is he suggesting that decisions should be taken before all the information is ready? That is reckless, to say the least. He fails to understand what is behind this project. The jobs were in the technology park, not in the circuit. The circuit only provided jobs to the region of about 137 full-time jobs. That's it. The rest of it, the thousands of jobs, were always going to be in the technology park and beyond. And that is exactly what we're going to invest in as a government. He's also wrong to say that this is simply £8 million over the next 33 years. We know, having explored this with ONS, who would refer this to Eurostat, that there's a very high risk of this guarantee being regarded as being on the balance sheet. That means we would lose £373 million of capital funding. £157 million would have to be found this financial year. That is, schools not being built, hospitals not being modernised, houses not being built. Now, surely he has to accept that that high risk cannot be ignored.
No, well, what we're talking about here is a bean counters convention. It's not. It's not. It is nothing new. We knew in advance of the decision being taken months and months ago what the ONS rules and the Treasury rules on how to treat long-term spending of this kind were. So this is something which could have been decided a very long time ago. Why has the Welsh Government allowed this project to limp along for 6 years when that could have been recognised right from the start? What we need to do here, surely, is to change the accounting convention rather than to destroy the hopes of those who were relying upon regenerating the whole of South East Wales. Because if it is the case that it is only the rules of the Office for National Statistics and Her Majesty's Treasury in London which has killed this project, then that is an absolute disgrace.
We can't change the rules. The rules are set by ONS. They are independent of government and they set rules in conjunction with Eurostat, and we have to be aware of what that risk might entail. He calls it a bean counters convention. The risk is far greater than that. If we end up with £373 million on our books, that means it's capital money we cannot spend. And surely he will understand. He's been in government, surely he understands this. He will know that that is a risk that any government must take seriously. He asked the question as to why this wasn't identified before. This was part of the conditions. The conditions stipulated 50-50. The conditions haven't been met. That's why it's a problem.
All the money which is going to be provided up front to build the Circuit of Wales is private sector money. All that the Welsh Government is being asked to do is to guarantee payments which will be made to the senior bondholders for less than half the capital employed in a period which only starts when the whole site has been developed. So there are physical assets then against which the contingent liability of the government would be secured. What we have now is a proposal from the government to spend £100 million over 10 years, shed loads of money on a series of empty sheds.
No. We have already assessed the demand, spoken to businesses. We know there is a demand for premises in the heads of the valleys. And we know that there are businesses who cannot move there because the premises aren't there. So it's hugely important to make sure that we provide those premises as part of the technology park that is part, actually, of the circuit itself. The only thing in many ways that's missing is the actual racetrack. The jobs, the vast majority of the jobs, are still there. He is not being honest with himself when he says this is only about a guarantee. He knows full well that if £373 million are reprofiled so they appear on our books, we lose the money. It's the same as a cut. It means we would have to find £157 million in this financial year. The problem we have is that we have pursued this with ONS and with Eurostat and with ONS, and their answer is we cannot give you a definitive ruling until we've seen the final contract. It's too late by then. That's the problem. So the real risk here is that we end up not moving ahead with projects in year that people have already been promised because of, yes, an accountancy device, but one nevertheless that the ONS have identified and one which carries a high risk.
Arweinydd Plaid Cymru, Leanne Wood.
I think you do have some further questions to answer about this, but I understand there's an urgent question coming later. So I'd like to ask you about another aspect of the economy, and that is in relation to education and skills. Many concerns have been expressed to me by teachers about their workload and linked to that growing sickness rates. Many people are considering leaving the profession now. Initial teacher training levels have been described as bordering on crisis. Do you agree?
No, I don't. I think there are great opportunities for us when paying conditions aren't evolved to put in place a holistic package for teachers to make sure that the responsibilities they have are reflected in terms of the pay that they receive. It's always been a strange anomaly that we have responsibility for education but not for paying conditions. That is at the heart of delivering a good deal for teachers, and that's what we intend to do.
Well, perhaps if you'd had unity on the question of devolving pay and conditions within your own party before now, we might have got somewhere with that. But I'm concerned about your refusal to face reality. I'm not really surprised, but I am concerned. First Minister, the words I used, crisis, were not my own words. They were the words used by the NUT. Back in April, Plaid Cymru warned that teacher recruitment was heading for a perfect storm. We are now in the middle of that storm. The secondary school intake for trainee teachers has dropped a third below the target. Now, that target is based on need, the number of teachers we need in our system. There's now a gap of around 280 secondary school teachers. And intake for primary school teachers has also now dropped below the target. We know from the Education Workforce Council that 1/3 of teachers intend to leave the profession within the next 3 years. First Minister, in March, changes to teacher training were announced. How long is it going to take for those changes to stop this downward trend?
I don't think it'll be possible to put in place the right package until paying conditions are devolved. Why? Well, people want to know what their terms of employment are, what their conditions of employment are, what they'll be paid, for what activities they'll be paid for, and that all impacts clearly on a decision to go into a profession. That impacts ultimately on numbers. Now, next year, we will have the opportunity and the responsibility of controlling teachers' pay and conditions. We want to work with the teaching unions to make sure we put forward a package that makes teaching more attractive than perhaps it has been for some people in the past. But getting control of pay and conditions is absolutely crucial to that.
So you're kicking it off again into the future then. The situation, First Minister, is worse than you were prepared to admit. The overall number of trainee teachers has dropped every single year since 2011, and the correspondence and conversations that I've had with teachers shows that there is a deep problem here. From your answer, I'm not convinced at all that you've got plans to treat this situation with any sense of urgency. What I want to see is our teaching profession supported. Why don't you talk to teachers and their trade unions and ask them what can be done in the immediate term to help with their workload and their mental well-being? You're putting things in place now which may well pay off in the future, but that decline in numbers has been evident for several years now. It's not a new problem, and the crisis is here and the crisis is now. You've previously admitted that you took your eye off the ball in education, and at that point in time you indicated that your government would up its game. Since you've made that admission in education, what exactly have you been doing?
Well, we can see GCSE results the best ever, A-level results going up, new schools being built all across Wales, the attainment gap closing, the people deprivation grant making a huge difference. And I mean, a slightly bizarre comment from the leader of Plaid Cymru suggesting we don't talk to teaching unions. I mean, the response from the Cabinet Secretary was I think, audible to most in the chamber, in order, but audible. That's what she does. And the link between ourselves and the teaching unions is strong. But we all recognise that in order to put in place the right package for teachers, we need to get that one last piece of the jigsaw, which is paying conditions. We've got it, and then it will be our responsibility. That's true.
Question 3, Hannah Blythen.
Will the First Minister provide an update on how the Welsh Government is supporting people living with dementia in North East Wales?
Well, we've provided nearly £8 million extra a year to improve dementia services in Wales. In line with our Taking Wales Forward commitment, we've also been working closely with stakeholders to develop a dementia strategic action plan, which will be published in the autumn.
Thank you, First Minister. I welcome the Welsh Government's commitment to supporting people living with dementia and their families, and you're right to say that at the core of any strategy and action plan, it must be those people who are the experts, so the people who are actually living with dementia, their carers and their families, to be at the core of that. Priority has to be given to make sure that people living with dementia live as well and for as long as possible. And for that to happen, we need to have the resources to support, educate and empower. And on that, I'm pleased that 2 towns in my constituency, Mold and Flint, now have the status of dementia-friendly towns. And more things like memory cafes are cropping up across the county. And Flintshire County Council are working, amongst other things, to accrediting more businesses with working towards dementia being dementia-friendly status with status and pledges of action. And on that note, last week, I myself and all my staff completed Dementia Friends training, even with someone who has got a close relative living with dementia. That certainly opened my eyes to things as part of that training. So can I ask, First Minister, that will the Welsh Government commit to working towards businesses and organisations and making sure that more businesses and organisations across the country do have that dementia-friendly status, and what you're doing with me and encouraging those Assembly members who haven't taken up the offer from the Alzheimer's Society to do Dementia Friends training to do that, so that we can actually get to a point when we can say all Assembly members and their offices in Wales are dementia friends.
Yes, well, I was at an event myself a week last Friday where the Alzheimer's Society were present. We talked about the issues surrounding becoming a dementia friend and the training that's required to do that. And of course, as a government, we support that. Dementia cafes, we know, provide people with dementia, their families and carers, the opportunity to meet in a friendly and relaxed environment where they can share experiences and, of course, offer peer support, hugely important as well. Now, expanding the availability of that support is an example of what we're looking to achieve through the forthcoming Dementia Strategic Action Plan.
Janet Finch-Saunders.
First Minister, it is shocking to note that for half of those living with dementia in Wales, an initial delayed diagnosis is a serious issue, affecting themselves and, of course, their loved ones. Alzheimer's Society Cymru have called for far more ambitious targets and interventions in this area. The Society have also called for earlier diagnosis rate targets to increase annually as part of your government's forthcoming revised dementia strategy. Will you ensure that overall aim and goal to allow for earlier diagnosis and intervention becomes a reality?
Hugely important. We know that in BCU, for example, about 49% of individuals with dementia have a diagnosis. Difficult initially, and sometimes people themselves, if they have no one who can recognise it for them, don't recognise it. But important that diagnosis is available. I know that BCU, for example, have begun work on developing a new local strategy for people with dementia, addressing the wide range of services that are required, and that work, of course, involves working with dementia groups.
Michelle Brown.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Dementia is incredibly hard on the family members who put their own lives on hold to care for a loved one with dementia. Carers become very tired and stressed. It's a very traumatic thing to have to do, to look after somebody with dementia, because effectively you're seeing them slip away piece by piece. How are you ensuring that adequate and consistent provisions being put in place by local authorities and health boards to support the needs of such carers in terms of respite care, advice and counselling?
Well, in addition to what I have just said to the Assembly, the mental health measure places a statutory requirement on all LHBs and local authorities to provide those with a diagnosis of dementia who need specialist mental health care with a care and treatment plan designed around their needs and those of their carers.
She moves quickly, seamlessly on. Cwestiwn 4, Simon Thomas.
Diolch Llywydd. Pa drafodaethau mae Llywodraeth Cymru wedi cynnal ynglyn â lleihau'r broblem gynyddol o gamblo eithafol?
Nad yw'r drefen o reoleiddio gamblo wedi ei datganoli, ni yn ymchwilio i weld beth yn ragor gallwn ni wneud i fynd i'r afael a gamblo problematig a'r effaith mae'n gael.
Wel, diolch Prif Weinidog. Chi'n gweud bod gamblo ei hunan a drefn ddim wedi datganoli. Mae effaith y sgil effeithiau yn sicr wedi datganoli, a mae iechyd meddwl a'r economi ac yn redig i mewn i degau o filiynau o bunnaidd o effaith yn Cymru pob blwyddyn. Mae yna rhywfaint o datganoli yn digwydd o gwmpas y peiriannau fixed odds fel yna'n cael ei galw, ac bydd fwy o alw felly Llywodraeth Cymru ymateb i'r her yma. Be ydych chi'n debyg o wneud yn ystod y blwyddyn neu ddwy nesaf i sicrhau bod ymchwil gwbl annibynnol, ymchwil sydd ddim yn dibynnol ar y diwydiant gamblo ei hunan, gyda chi fel Llywodraeth i sicrhau bod chi'n mesuro'r effaith gamblo yn briodol ac yn gywir ar ein cymunedau ni?
Wel, mae yna waith da'n cael ei wneud gan gyrff ar draws Cymru, ond ni yn gweld y gamblo fel problem wrth gwrs, ac yn problem sydd ynglyn â iechyd meddwl. Weithio, wrth gwrs, bod ffili stopo achos hynny. Mae'r prif swyddog meddygol yn arwain gwaith yn yr ardal hyn, ac wrth gwrs ni'n edrych mlaen i weld i argymhellion yn nes mlaen yn y flwyddyn, ac wrth gwrs byddai'r argymhellion hynny wedyn ni rhywbeth allan ni i adeiladu arno mwyn delio gyda'r problem hyn.
Darren Miller.
Diolch, Llywydd. I too would like to see further devolution in respect of responsibility for gambling here to Wales, but we do have some powers already, including powers through the planning system, whereby we could take action to prevent the proliferation of licensed betting shops in small communities. We know that there's a proliferation, particularly in deprived communities, of gambling outlets, and that can be a particular problem. I wonder what action the Welsh Government will consider taking through the planning process to address this issue.
In terms of the planning process, I mean, he's right to identify that there has been a growth, it seems to me, in betting shops over the years. That's only part of the problem. Online gambling is a major issue as well, and if people are gambling online, they're particularly hard to reach. If I could write to him on the issue of the planning process and how that deals with gambling, well, I will do that, providing with a detailed answer.
Cwestiwn 5, Dai Lloyd.
Diolch yn fawr, Llywydd. A wnaeth y Prif Weinidog amlinellu cynlluniau Llywodraeth Cymru i gefnogi unigolion sy'n colli eu cliw.
O gyhoeddodd y Llywodraeth fframwaith gofal a chymorth integredig fis diwetha ar gyfer pobl sy'n fyddar neu'n colli eu cliw. Mae'r ddogfen yn amlinellu yn cynllun i wella'r ddarpariaeth o wasanaethau iechyd a gofal cymdeithasol a chymorth i sicrhau gofal o ansawdd uchel trwy Gymru.
Wel, diolch yn fawr am yr ateb yna, Prif Weinidog, ac yn bellach i hynna, falla agweddwch fod prosiect Here to Meet a gyflwynir gan Action on Hearing Loss wedi dod i ben. Mae hyn yn golygu y bu colled yn y gefnogaeth ar gyfer unigolion sydd â cholled cliw ledled Cymru. Yn dilyn hynny felly, ydych Llywodraeth chi yn barod i gydweithio gyda sefydliadau megis Cyngor Cymru i bobl fyddar ac eraill i gau'r bwlch sydd wedi ymddangos oherwydd colled y brosiect bwysig yma. Diolch yn fawr.
Wel, mi oedd yna gynhadledd i Gwener diwetha yn Abertawe, sef gynhadledd awdioleg cenedlaethol. Oedd yr ymgynghorydd gwyddonol, y prif ymgynghorydd gwyddonol yna i roi cyflwyniad iddyn nhw. Ac wrth gwrs wedi bwysleisio o'r fframwaith o weithred a mae'n glir bod yna lot fawr o gefnogaeth i'r gwaith hyn. Holl bwysig felly bod y fframwaith ei hunan yn symud trwyddo a bod ni wrth gwrs yn sicrhau bod hwnna yn cael effaith ar fywydau bobl.
Julie Morgan.
Thank you. I know the First Minister is aware that deaf children and children with poor communication skills are more likely to be the target of abuse than other children. And in January, in a short debate, I highlighted the abuse suffered by children at a special school for deaf children in Llandrindod, Wales in the 1950s, where sadly it was the children with poor speech skills who were being targeted, and that issue is being pursued. But what mechanisms are in place to make educational professionals aware that these children with hearing loss are often targeted, and what measures are in place to ensure they're adequately protected from such abuse in the future?
Ultimately, of course, it's a matter for schools to determine, to ensure that bullying does not occur within schools, but the Additional Learning Needs Bill, if passed, will completely overhaul the system for supporting pupils with additional learning needs, including learners with hearing impairments. It'll obviously put the learner at the heart of that process and make it simpler for those involved. There will be finance, of course, to support the bill. And as part of the narrative around that bill, I would want to make sure that the issue around, that bullying is dealt with as part of that narrative. Yes, it is important to support those with additional learning needs, but in the widest way possible, including, of course, protecting them from bullying.
Paul Davies.
Prif Weinidog, mae'n bwysig bod Llywodraeth Cymru yn creu'r amodau cywir i fagu gweithlu addysg sy'n fedrus ac yn darparu ar gyfer ystod eang o anghenion dysgu ychwanegol gan gynnwys y rhai sy'n dioddau o nam ar y cliw. A dwi'n siŵr eich bod yn ymwybodol o'r galwadau i ychwanegu iaith arwyddion Prydain i'r cwricwlwm cenedlaethol. Felly allwch chi ein diweddaru ni ar y datblygiadau diweddarau i ychwanegu iaith arwyddion i'r cwricwlwm, ac hefyd gallwch chi ddweud wrthyn ni beth mae Llywodraeth Cymru yn ei wneud i annog busnesau i ddysgu iaith arwyddion, i wneud gwasanaethau lleol mor hygyrch a phosib i bawb gan gynnwys y rhai sydd wedi colli eu cliw.
Wel, mae yna safonau ynglyn â cael mynediad i'r gwasanaeth iechyd, yn erbyn wrth gwrs y safonau hynny i gael i ddilyn. Ynglyn â ymha ffordd allwn ni i hybu busnesau er enghraifft i ddefnyddio gweithgareddau sydd yn gallu cael ei ddefnyddio gan bobl fyddar. Mae hwnna'n rhywbeth ni moyn gweithio gyda'r grwpiau hyn ynglyn â sicrhau bod hwnna yn digwydd. Ac wrth gwrs i sicrhau bod BSL ar gael lle mae hwnna'n bosib. Ynglyn â lle bydde BSL yn gweithio yn y cwricwlwm, gai ofyn felly i'r gweinidog addysg i sgrifennu at yr aelod mwyn rhoi mwy o fanylion ato fe.
Cwestiwn 6, Neil Hamilton.
Will the First Minister make a statement on social care in Mid and West Wales?
Well, social care is a sector of strategic importance. We provided an extra £55 million of recurring funding for social services. The regional partnership boards have completed their population needs assessment and continue to deliver integrated care funded through the Integrated Care Fund.
I thank the First Minister for that reply, and we all appreciate the financial challenge that social care will pose for us in the future. We have a situation in North Ceredigion now where the Council has announced the closure of a care home called Bodlondeb. This has come as a bolt from the blue. Nobody knows where the residents will be sent to. There is no social care plan for North Ceredigion, yet there is a consultation going on over the closure of this home. Is it not unfair upon those who are placed in this position that there is this uncertainty? And the Council has spent apparently £2 million on PricewaterhouseCoopers advice on £12 to £14 million worth of council cuts. Does this not seem a sort of bizarre priority when the real needs of real people are going by the board?
Well, I understand there will be a consultation on the closure of Bodlondeb it'll carry on until the 25th of September. It is a very difficult time, obviously, for all of those who are concerned. Can I say to the member that the safety and well-being of residents is my main concern, and the Care and Social Services Inspectorate will be working closely with the Council to ensure this is carried out throughout the process.
Angela Burns. First Minister, the recent Mid and West Wales Health and Social Care Regional Collaborative Statement on Services for Older People makes for concerning reading. The population of the Haldar University Health Board area already has a higher proportion of older people than the Wales average, and that already high proportion is predicted to increase dramatically in the coming years. And yet the number of people in the HDU area under the age of 65 years who provide unpaid care is predicted to decrease significantly in the next 10 to 15 years, and it is already proving very difficult to recruit paid carers. It is a job not well paid, with enormous time pressures. Very often they're not paid for the distance of travel that they do, and it is not often regarded well by other people within society. What are you, as the Welsh Government, going to do to raise and improve the caring status so that we can get more carers? And what can you do you think your government could do to encourage and reward those people who do provide unpaid care selflessly, day in and day out, for their loved ones?
Well, the member will know that unfair employment practices, she's identified them, are bad for individuals. That's why we're taking action on zero-hours contracts through guidance, through procurement and through our consultation on proposed regulations for social care. It's hugely important, of course, that the caring profession is valued, hugely important that they are rewarded appropriately, and that, of course, is what the regulations intend to do.
Cwestiwn 7, Vicky Howells.
Diolch, Llywydd. Will the First Minister outline how the Welsh Government is supporting serving and retired armed forces personnel and their families in the Cynon Valley?
Well, we've made it clear in taking Wales forward that our commitment is to support both serving and ex-service personnel and their families so that they are not disadvantaged by their service.
First Minister, on Saturday I will be attending RCT's Armed Forces Day event in Aberdeen, and I want to applaud RCT for their proactive approach in this issue, as councils have such a key role in delivering many of the frontline services personnel and their families rely on. The minutes of the expert group on the needs of the armed forces community in Wales notes plans to review the work of armed forces champions. Are you able to give us an update on this important work, how it supports our armed forces and meets their needs?
Yes, I was at Armed Forces Day myself, our Welsh National Armed Forces Day in Caerphilly on Saturday. Very important to support that event. I know I have to say that the one event that stands out in my mind is a gentleman in uniform coming towards me, shaking my hand and saying, well done on the election result, not realising that Alan Keynes was standing next to me. But nevertheless, I'll take that for what it is. But I can say, in terms of the issue itself, the Cabinet Secretary for Communities and Children, who chairs, of course, the Armed Forces Expert Group, will be meeting with local authority champions following the summer recess to discuss their role and the support they can give to the armed forces community in their areas, building on, of course, what we have already done as a government.
David Melding.
First Minister, you'll know that Nancarrow has recently been chosen as the base for the new 24-hour helpline for armed forces veterans. This will be a great help all over Wales, but also RCT and Cynon Valley in particular. Now, this is part of the 2014 Veterans Transition Review, which also recommended that local authorities conduct an audit of their social housing provision and see how that does serve armed forces personnel and veterans. Do you agree that Welsh local authorities should take part in this review and get on with that work as soon as possible?
Yes, but it's very important that they're able to assess the need in their areas, particularly in terms of housing. We have developed an ex-service personnel housing referral pathway to help them and their families make an informed choice of their accommodation needs on transferring back into civilian life. On top of that, to further promote the pathway, we have developed advice cards for ex-service personnel sleeping rough. Too many, I'm afraid, but we know that the problem is there with leaflets and posters. And these publications will include contact details for the new Veterans Gateway service. It's designed to be a one-stop shop for veterans and family members to access services and support in one place. So much has been done already, not just to provide information for those who need housing and are looking for housing, but those who are in desperate need and are sleeping rough.
Neil McAvoy.
First Minister, will your government legislate to guarantee housing and healthcare for veterans who have seen active service?
Well, we've done much so far. £585,000 per annum is provided to Veterans NHS Wales, a unique service, the only one of its kind in the UK. We know that over 2,900 referrals have been received in that time. Service personnel in need of particular specialist health care can access the fast-track referral pathway. That's a joint initiative between the Defence Medical Service and NHS Wales, which prioritises access to secondary care, and that ensures that serving members of the armed forces are not disadvantaged by their service and have the same standard of access to health care as that received by any other resident in Wales.
Mohammed Ashka.
What action will the Welsh Government take to improve the lives of people with learning disabilities in Wales over the next 12 months, please?
Well, a Learning Disability Advisory Group is established. It will advise on a reviewed strategic action plan. Learning disability is a priority for the regional partnership boards as well. And of course, in 2016, we extended the Integrated Care Fund to include support for people with a learning disability.
Thank you for the reply, First Minister. A recent report by Aston said that the colleges should do more to prepare young people with learning disabilities for independent living. They found that only a few set realistic goals to help students develop their communication and work skills, and call for colleges to set individual learning plans and to design programs that challenge pupils more. What action will the Welsh Government take in view of Aston's findings to help and support students with learning disabilities to achieve their full potential in life?
Well, he will know that the response to Aston's recommendations was published last week, but I can say in 2015 to 16, for example, we invested over 140,000 on a project to support workforce capacity building in the FE sector, with a particular emphasis on increasing access for young people with complex learning disabilities. We are also investing an additional £250,000 during 2016, or have invested an additional £250,000 for 2016 to 17 for a project to improve the quality of teaching and learning in the independent living skills learning area, on top of course, the response that we've already given.
Davis.
Diolch, Llywydd. First Minister will know that the Welsh Government strategies depend very much on frontline delivery, very often from third sector organisations. So within the Bridgend and Ogmore area, it's organisations like Drive, like Cartrefi Cymru, and like Myrus, and also BCBC's supported living service. All of these play a key role in enabling people with disabilities to live independently at home or close to home. So what more can the Welsh Government do, not only at a strategic level, but working in partnership with those organisations and with local authorities to deliver that support for independent living?
Well, the Learning Disability Advisory Group was set up in 2012. Its purpose is to inform learning disability policy within the context of the Social Services and Wellbeing Wales Act 2014, and to provide advice to the Welsh Ministers on learning disability issues. The group is made up of learning disabled people, third sector organisations working in the field, and health and social care representatives. Alongside that, a learning disability strategic action plan is being developed following the review of learning disability that's currently being undertaken.
Cwestiwn 9, Sian Gwenllian.
A wnaeth y Prif Weinidog ddatganiad am ardrethu busnes yn y sector ynni cymunedol.
Wel, yn 2017 i 18, mae mwy na 210 miliwn o bunnoedd o'r ryddhad yn cael ei ddarparu i helpu trychdalwyr gyda'i hardreithu anomestig. Mae hynna ar gael i bob trychdalwr cymwys sy'n bodloni'r meini prawf gan gynnwys prosiectau yn ei cymunedol.
Y ddydd Sadwrn, roedden ni'n lansio 2 gynllun yn ei dŵr yn Arfon, sef yn ei Cadarn Peris ac yn ei Ogwen. Mae yn ei Anafon yn weithredol yn barod, a dwi'n falch iawn fod gynnon ni 3 cynllun sydd yn harnesu un o'n hadnoddau naturiol mwyaf dibenadwy ni, sef dŵr, a fod yr elw sy'n cael ei greu yn cael ei wario ar brosiectau yn y gymuned ac yn dod â manteision i bobl lleol. Ond yn anffodus, mae'r broses o ail-brisio trethu wedi creu pryder mawr yn y sector yma ac yn debygol o rwystro datblygiadau i'r dyfodol. Mae'r Alban wedi mynd ati i gyflwyno pecyn rhyddhad trethu ar gyfer cynlluniau o'r math, gan ddangos yn glir eu cefnogaeth nhw i'r sector yma. Fedwch chi ymrwymo y bydd Llywodraeth Cymru hefyd yn cyflwyno pecyn tebyg bydd yn rhoi gwell sicrwydd i gynlluniau yn ei cymunedol ar draws Cymru.
Wrth gwrs, mae yna gynllun lle yn barod mwyn sicrhau bod ryddhad i gwmnïau ynglyn â trethu yn y ffordd hyn. Ni yn gweithio gyda'r sector mwyn sicrhau pa fath o gefnogaeth gallif gael ei roi ynglyn â beth sy'n ar hyn o bryd. Ac wrth gwrs, ni waan sicrhau bod y sector yn tyfu yn y pen draw. Anodd i wybod beth yw'r ffactorau unigol ynglyn â'r cwmni mae'r aelod wedi sôn amdano, a beth maen nhw wedi, pa fath o brofiad maen nhw wedi cael. Os mae moyn sgwennu ato fe gyda'i beth mae hi wedi clywed wrthyn nhw, byddai'n falch gwrs i ateb.
David Rowlands.
Yes, First Minister, we know that many of those who have developed these community hydro projects are very worried about these huge increases. Now, as the member for Avon has alluded to, the Scottish Government has actually said that it will have 100% business rates relief for these projects. And even the government in England has committed that it will not cost them more than £600 increases. Can we have those assurances from the Welsh Government that we will put those sort of rate reliefs into place?
Well, we already have a rate relief system for non-domestic rates that is more generous than is the case, for example, in England. More businesses are covered by that relief scheme than is the case there. I can also say that WEFO has put out a call for organisations to submit proposals to benefit from £14 million of EU funds for small-scale renewable energy initiatives. 10 million is available to West Wales and the Valleys and 4 million to East Wales, and any organisation, whether they are public, private or third sector, can apply. I can say that the deadline for proposals is the 30th of June, so not a huge amount of time left, but nevertheless that offer has been on the table for some time.
Diolch i'r Prif Weinidog. Yn unol y rheol sefydlog 12.69, dwi wedi derbyn cais gan y Prif Weinidog i wneud cynnig am ddadl frys, a dwi'n galw ar Carwyn Jones i wneud y cynnig.
Well, yesterday, Llywydd, we saw an announcement of a financial deal between the Conservative Party and the Democratic Unionist Party that has caused widespread concern, not just amongst parties in this chamber, but amongst the general public in Wales. Of particular concern is the amount, £1 billion, and also that extra money is being provided for health and education, areas that are normally provided for via the Barnett formula. Why, for example, there are health pressures in Northern Ireland and not in Wales, as the UK government sees it, we will have to get an explanation as to why that is. Nor is it the case that a comparison can be made with city deals. This is £1 billion over 2 years. City deals in Wales deliver something like £60 million a year, or £120 million over the same period. It is only right, given the effect on the finances of Wales, that members in this chamber have the opportunity to express a view and express their concerns about the deal that was done yesterday, and so I formally move the appropriate motion under the standing order in order for that debate to take place.
Y cwestiwn yw a ddylid derbyn y cynnig am ddadl frys, a oes unrhyw aelod yn gwrthwynebu? Felly, derbynir y cynnig am ddadl frys yn unol ar rheol sefydlog perthnasol, a gan yn bod ni nawr wedi penderfynu y bydd y ddadl yn cael ei chynnal, yna mi mi fedrai gadarnhau y bydd y ddadl yn cael ei chynnal yn hwyrach heddiw ac yn dilyn y ddadl ar cyfnod 4 o'r bil treth gwarediadau tirlenwi Cymru. Yr eitem nesaf yn agenda ni yw'r datganiad a chyhoeddiad busnes, a dwi'n galw ar arweinydd y TJ